Of course, it's appropriate to start with reference to the scientific study of UFOs prepared by Dr. Condon and his 36-member staff at the University of Colorado during 1967 and 1968. As Dr. Roberts has already said, this symposium was delayed for a year so that the full content of the Condon report could be read and digested after its publication in January of this year. The Bantam Book paperback edition of the Condon report contains some 1,000 pages, including case studies, analyses along several different scientific disciplines, and a 20-year historical summary. My own experience actually goes back to a panel convened by H.P. Robertson in 1953. We issued a very much shorter report, and it was classified secret. Another panel, which met under the chairmanship of Brian O'Brien in 1966, also issued a report, but it was not very widely read. The Air Force, which is charged with the responsibility for investigating UFOs, came to realize that public education, mind you, is needed to alleviate the so-called UFO problem. For instance, about 90% of the 13,000 reports in Project Blue Book could have been recognized as normal physical phenomena by persons who had studied elementary astronomy in high school or college. Of course, the press and other mass media have influenced public reaction in a manner that will be discussed later in the symposium. As we all know, public demand has helped to build up a large body of published literature, some of which, I must admit, is fallacious or highly speculative, and it's all of special appeal to readers uneducated in science, particularly youngsters in high school and early college years. At present, it's fair to say that the attitude towards UFOs is highly polarized between what I'll call conservative views of a small group of very senior physical scientists, and these will be discussed in the session tomorrow morning, and the vastly more speculative views of a large fraction of the U.S. public. This symposium is directed towards a middle group, the AAAS membership, who we hope want to learn more about the facts of the UFO problem and to hear a rational discussion of alternative explanations of the peculiar sightings that will be described, and to go over some of the sociological interpretations of the very widespread UFO phenomenon. For instance, I hope the psychologists, some of whom are here today, will take note of what I like to call Page's Law, that a wave of UFO reports seems to move eastward around the world and completes one full circuit in about 17 years. The special committee which organized this symposium, as Dr. Roberts has already said, is convinced that a logical discussion of a topic that's already had such wide publicity will serve a beneficial educational service, both among the scientists present here today and the general public who will hear some of this discussion through the press and may have thereby some of their misconceptions corrected. But it would be ridiculous, as Dr. Roberts said, to claim that in a 2-day symposium we can come up with the correct answer to the UFO question. The Condon report, which involved over 50 man-years of study, reached a conclusion, which has been disputed by many, that further study is not worthwhile. And as already been mentioned, the Air Force has recently discontinued its Project Blue Book files. In case you don't know, they're to be moved from the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base to the USAF archives at Maxwell Air Force Base in Montgomery, Alabama, where access will be controlled by the Office of Information, Department of the Air Force in Washington. Some of us are concerned about these files, which we consider to have considerable scientific importance. Although the Blue Book files were far from perfect, their termination has disappointed many people, including some of the scientists here. I'd like to quote from what Condon himself wrote in the section 1, page 2 of the Condon report. I quote, Scientists are no respecters of authority. Our conclusion, this refers to his conclusion that further UFO studies are not worthwhile, our conclusion will not be uncritically accepted by the scientists, nor should it be, nor do we wish it to be. For scientists, it is our hope that the detailed analytical presentation of what we were able to do and of what we were unable to do will assist them in deciding whether or not they agree with our conclusion. Unquote. It was nice of him to give us this choice, and I choose to disagree with at least one of his conclusions. That is, the harmful effect of UFO literature. Dr. Condon was not able to be with us here. He devotes the last half page of his conclusions and recommendations to what he calls miseducation in our schools, which arises from the fact that many children are being encouraged to devote their science study time to the reading of UFO books and magazine articles. Unquote. Now, there can be no doubt that some of the books and articles on UFOs are unsuitable and misleading, just as popular books on science fiction, astrology, drugs, and sex, all of which are equally available, may be deleterious for young readers. I chose to review the Cato's annotated bibliography of UFO publications. It's that book right here. Cato is in the Library of Congress. This was published by the Air Force Office of Scientific Research, and it's AFOSR number 68-1656, published earlier this year. In this, I found in the general category of UFO publications in English, 71 books, 28 pamphlets, 73 magazine articles, which have been available and widely read in the United States since 1947. Actually, the pamphlets and magazine articles I took only since 1960, because it seemed to me that the interest in old magazine articles was minimal. I classified these in 8 categories, ranging from conservative science, which is a strong effort to debunk the UFO reports, and the Air Force position, which was a couple of books about how the Air Force has undertaken its analysis. From that extreme through descriptive historical reports, and several books, for instance, by Fuller and others, speculative treatments of extraterrestrial visitors, and the most extreme on the speculative side are books and articles about contacts with UFO pilots and whatnot. The statistics, which I have tabulated here but won't spend too much time on, are interesting in themselves. The publication dates of these journals, magazine articles and books given in Cato's bibliography show the 3 waves which had hit the United States in 1950, 58, and 66. And then it's interesting to see where the articles were published. There are, of course, 7 specific UFO journals: APRO Newsletter, Bufora Journal in the United Kingdom, Fate, Flying Saucers, Flying Saucer Review, Saucer News, which is also in Britain, and the UFO Investigator. But articles of some length appeared in publications like America, Argosy, Giant Comic Book, Maclean's, The New Republic, Life, Look, Newsweek, New Yorker, Playboy, Saga, Spectator, Nation, Saturday Evening Post, Saturday Review, Time, True, U.S. News and World Report. And interesting enough, in other journals which are less available to the high school students that Condon is worrying about, Bioscience, Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists, Journal of the Optical Society of America, Aero Digest, Science, the publication of AAAS, Science Digest, Physics Today, and the Yale Scientific Magazine. I didn't read the whole list, but this gives you an idea of the publications we're talking about. The books show a much wider range in speculativeness than the pamphlets and magazines. About 10% of the books, remember there were 71 of them, are extremely conservative, and about 20% are highly speculative. The pamphlets and magazine articles of the last 9 years, anyway, tend to be much more grouped in the center of liberal, scientific, or historical type discussion. And they're, I think, quite suitable for student reading. If you eliminate the books like Adamski's Inside the Spaceships, even the speculative books can be used under supervision of an experienced science teacher as interest rousers. And as any teacher knows, student interest in a topic, even if it derives from misconception, is better than no interest at all. So to test this use of UFOs in the teaching of science, at Wesleyan University, I offered an undergraduate elective course. It's called Science 101, designed to interest non-science majors who would otherwise have had no science courses whatsoever. Along with a number of other science teachers there, I've become very frustrated with the diminishing undergraduate interest in physical science. And I have a table here which shows that whereas in the class of 1960, 16% of the students graduated with majors in the physical sciences. That means including math, physics, chemistry, astronomy, geology. That dropped down to 7% in 1969. And the numbers in between just right down. This is frustrating at a time when it seems to me that space exploration, electronic computers, nuclear physics offer much more exciting work than anything in my previous experience. The source of disinterest, or even hostility to the physical sciences, has been traced to the poor teaching of mathematics and physics in grade school and high school. But this scarcely helps to solve the problem of what we should do about a generation of college students who want nothing to do with physical science, at a time when more young physicists, engineers, and astronomers are needed. Of course, my colleagues on the faculty at Wesleyan laughed at my offering a course called Flying Saucers. That was in the fall semester of 1967. But it was oversubscribed and reoffered by student demand in the spring of 1968 as Flying Sickles, a reference to the UFO reports in the Soviet Union. The course was maintained for another school year and then discontinued because I was away from the university down at NASA Manned Spacecraft Center. Very briefly, this one-semester course consisted of 2 lectures and a discussion session each week with a 2-week reading period near the end. We started with a review of UFO reports and then spent 5 weeks on elementary astronomy. The reasoning being that planets, bright stars, and meteors are often reported as flying saucers or UFOs. The importance of celestial coordinates and time was stressed for proper reporting of UFOs. Then the students were interested enough, or villainous enough, to phone me late in the evening every time they saw something that looked like a UFO. One of my most active evenings was in November '67, when there was a bright moon dog, a circle around the moon. It was reported to me by every one of the 50 students in my class. I kept the phone busy the whole darn evening. At this point, we shifted to atmospheric physics and discussed ball lightning and refraction and aurorae for a week or two, and then returned to astronomy for a discussion of the extraterrestrial hypothesis. The students learned that conditions on other planets of the solar system are not conducive to life, discussed theories of the origin of the solar system and the origin of life, which was a very popular topic. They learned how stellar distances are measured by parallax, discussed the probability of life on planets around other stars, and recognized the difficult problems of interstellar travel. It's a long way to the nearest star, and if you try to go very fast, the impacts with interstellar hydrogen, which we know about and the students learned about, is kind of difficult. In a 2-week reading period, each student wrote a term paper on a topic which he selected from a list that I've reproduced in my paper here, that I'll give you some idea. The topics were the Ptolemaic system in astronomy, the Earth's atmosphere, aurorae and how they work, what the explanation of the aurora is, celestial mechanics, how close other planets get to us and how fast they're moving, space probes, how long it takes to get to the moon and Mars, the moon and planets, all the surface conditions of the moon. This was before we had Apollo data on the lunar surface. The solar system and its origin, and the origin of life, and then a historical summary of the flying saucer reports. So each student wrote a paper of 3,000 or 4,000 words about this, about one of the topics. This was passed to another student to criticize. And in all but a very few cases, these critiques of the second student revealed a clear understanding of the astronomy involved and then the physics. The 3 best papers each semester were published, and there's some copies still over on that table of studies of UFOs that were considered by the students themselves to be the best in the class. We sold them for 25 cents in Middletown, but we're giving them away free here. Each semester we had a TV show in Hartford, and the 3 best authors appeared with me on a half-hour show explaining their views on UFOs, and they gained first-hand experience with the publicity aspects of the UFO phenomenon. And by the way, earlier in the semester we'd had 2 speakers from outside. In the first semester was Dr. Hynek, who will talk to us tomorrow, and Dr. Menzel, who may talk to us tomorrow, lectured to the class, and the students had a chance to ask me questions and learned a good deal more about the publicity difficulties. Well, I'm convinced that the students learned a good deal of astronomy, physics, and biology in my flying saucer course, although I must admit that such a course is not suitable for regular science program, and that it loses its appeal after 3 or 4 repetitions, which is what we tried. For lab work, the students learned constellations, spotted an Earth-orbiting spacecraft, looked at bright planets through a small telescope, and several of them searched for the evidence of UFOs on pictures taken by the cameras of the Prairie Network, which will be discussed a little later this afternoon. After one session on this, we decided that all the astronomical telescopes in the world have almost no chance of photographing a UFO passing through a telescope field by chance. On the other hand, this Prairie Network has a much better chance of photographing UFOs. The Canadians have recently established a similar network, and the Czechs had a network for all 3 of them, designed, of course, for studying meteors rather than UFOs, but certainly available for getting hard data on UFO appearances. So in conclusion, I think that the general advancement of science depends heavily on the public's education in science, and most of the significant research today depends on public support, obviously, at universities, the foundation support or government financing. And it's obvious that all students and older citizens also must be given enough science education to recognize what's worthwhile in the science effort. For a number of reasons, a large fraction of the students in the public are interested in UFOs, and I think that teachers can certainly capitalize on this interest in teaching courses of broad appeal. Scientists in general should take advantage of the public interest in UFOs to correct public misconceptions about science.